So I'm going to introduce very shortly, very briefly, John Curtis, the Barefoot Gardener. How many of you went on the bus tour that we stopped in and it was raining that day and John remembers the bus? And I remember the Barefoot Gardener.
Yes, I did.
And we really enjoyed ourselves, and I wanted him to come and talk to this group. And with that, John, I'll turn it over to you. And I need to get your presentation.
I feel like I'm letting you down. I wore shoes.
I didn't recognize you. I tell you that. I
Folks,
said, oh, there's an imposter here.
Does anybody in the back want to move up? Because there's a lot of space on either side here. Can you see fine? Everybody here is okay? Okay.
Come on, get closer. Show the love.
So, my name's John Curtis, Barefoot Gardens, of course. The story for me really starts in about 1990 when I graduated from college. I went into the United States Peace Corps. And my assignment was to manage a USAID model farm. And I didn't know anything about gardening. I don't think I could have told you the difference between a maple leaf and an oak leaf. And while I was there, I worked with the men in the village, and I would go out with them during the day, out into their little plots in the mountains, and they showed me how to use a machete, they showed me how to weed, and I just fell in love with agriculture. Yeah?
Where did you serve?
I'm sorry, the Dominican Republic. Okay, right near the Haitian border in the Caribbean. Thank you. And so when I came back to the United States, I just started gardening. And for a couple of years, we moved about every 3 months. So my garden was 5-gallon buckets in the back of my pickup truck. And when we started to stay in a place for more than a few months, we'd have little gardens in the back. And eventually we built our own place, and I started to garden just about the same time I put the roof on the house. So it's kind of in my blood. This is, when I talk about it being in my blood, this is a photo of my great-grandfather, John Curtis, on his threshing machine with my great-uncle Damon there. And that farm is still in the family. It's 9 miles south of Macomb. There's a picture of my grandfather and my great-grandfather fishing in Grindstone, or fish out of Grindstone Creek. And then the tractor came, and everything changed. My grandfather and my dad there, probably about 1948, what do you think? That's when my grandfather stopped farming with horses and started farming with a tractor. And of course that led to this. Now when people think of agriculture in the Midwest, this is what they think of, right? Yes. Corn and soybeans. And anymore, that's about all we have. But part of my interest in the work that I do is that I feel that there's a lot of ground out there that could be growing vegetables, that could be raising chickens or livestock on pasture. And you know, I think we don't want to limit ourselves to corn and soybeans, especially when you look at the economic impact of these huge fluctuating prices, right? There's our modern corn facility near Macomb at the, I'm trying to still remember the name, 9 Mile T? 9 Mile Y?
Yeah.
I'm going to get that one. So this is a satellite photo of Barefoot Gardens. And you can see it's just lots and lots and lots of little plots. Sometimes we'll grow well over 300 varieties of vegetables, flowers, herbs, and some berries. And when you came on your bus tour, the bus parked right here. I didn't think he was going to make it. And we walked past the barn and came down. You could see all the crops down here. And normally my CSA members park in this area. They come up to the house, and then we have most of our vegetables in these areas. Isn't satellite photography just amazing? I'm going backwards. So, This is just a few shots of the landscape, just to give you a sense of our place. That's from the roof of the house. And I find that I love the pictures from June. Almost all the pictures are from June, right? It's just when the colors are their best.
June is just lovely.
Will, who I'm with today, he's my right and my left-hand man on the place. He's the one who taught me photography. So I've been an eager student for the last year and a half. But you get a sense for all the different crops, right? Every one of these is a different bed. We might have as many as 5 different crops on the same plot of land during the year, especially in the hoop houses. And we also have moved away from the straight row planting.
Yeah.
Of course, we still do that, but we like to make it, we just kind of want it to be beautiful as well as productive. And that's from the top of the hill. And that's from the bottom of the hill. And this is a close-up. You get a sense for the spacing of the crops. We do a lot of planting in little tiny soil blocks. And then we start them in soil blocks, and then we plant them at precise spacing. So we can grow a lot of food in a very small place, in a very small space, because we plant them very tightly together with very good fertilization, organic fertilization. Although the USDA says I can't use that word, that's against the law now, right? But since I'm not paying to be certified. And as soon as those lettuces are harvested, we'll come in the next day, prep the ground, and plant the next crop. Some other shots of the landscape. And there's Will. Yeah. Yeah, and Will usually is barefoot. Even, I don't know if you were today. Yeah. And I am often too. But I want you to notice there are no weeds here, but Will is still out there with the hoe. We practice, when we can, this was a tough summer for it, we practice clean cultivation. So we want to come out about every 10 days and kind of scrape the soil surface of every square inch of the garden. And ideally, in a normal year, right? We've only had one normal year in the last 40, right? We can keep the gardens pretty clean. We had a disastrous year this year. It was just, I mean, you all know, you're gardeners, right? And it's a lot of handwork. We're often prepping beds by hand. We have a rototiller, a big rototiller, and I have a little tractor that my grandfather gave me a year and a half ago that we use sometimes for big plots for rototilling. And we rely a lot on volunteer crews. We have people that come out. We had our crew out today. On this cold day, we had 3 people out, including Janet, who just turned 80. They come out in the morning, they work all day. We give them coffee in the middle of the day. We try to have some kind of dessert. Will cooked a nice venison stew for everybody for lunch today. So we take care of them, but it is a volunteer crew, and that's how we we're able to do a lot of the things that we're able to do. And this, Laura, is 8 months pregnant. She was out working all day today. She wasn't in that photo. No.
It was like, whoa.
Yeah. So again, we grow many, many different varieties of crops. We really want to specialize in crops that you cannot get in the grocery store. We're just always looking. And for me, one of my favorite crops is lettuces. I have probably hundreds of photos of lettuces. For me, they're like my roses. So you can see I'm fond of the. This variety is Nancy, Winter Density. North Pole, I think. And at one point this spring, we had 35 different varieties of head lettuce out. So we're always trying to grow lots and lots of different. And then we have the tomatoes. Does anybody recognize these?
That's tomatoes?
Uh-huh.
That's a tomato.
Good. Green zebra tomato? Anybody? Guess? Cherokee purple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, now the hot peppers. Any takers?
Jalapenos
Those
in the
are
right corner.
jalapenos down.
That's that might be a jalapeno, I think.
Yeah.
The
A little
left
bit.
one's jalapeno.
That's a Czech black. This is a
Habanero?
no, that's the yes, it's habanero family. It's the hottest one. Help me. The ghost. Yeah, ghost. Butaloki, I think is the Indian name. And then this one's yellow lightning, which is also a habanero.
Very good.
And I think we had 27 varieties of hot peppers this year. And really, only about 1 out of 5 of my members really likes hot peppers, but the ones who like hot peppers love hot
Love it.
peppers. Oh, you know, they're just like, and we do some dried beans.
Nice.
That's an Italian climbing variety that's just spectacular. I don't even know the name. We've been saving the seed for so long. We do some berries. We're still trying to figure it out. We're just not very good with raspberries yet. And we grow a lot of flowers. And how many of you have bought a bouquet in the last year? Right? How much does a bouquet of flowers
Oh,
cost?
they're horrible. $7, $8.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are grown in Colombia. They're sprayed
they
like
don't
crazy.
smell.
You know you should wash your hands very well if you handle florist flowers. You know, the flowers we grow, people come and they just cut all they want, and they're taking big armfuls of flowers. So that's a big attraction at our place. That's a bouquet Linda Borowski did.
Where is your place?
No, John, that's unsolicited, no.
3 miles west of Macomb.
So you're,
Oh, that's.
So some different flowers that we grow. 6 years ago, we started growing in hoop houses. And for years, I had heard about hoop houses, but I was like, oh, plants will be better when they can get water from, when they can get rain on them and so on. Oh my gosh, I was so wrong. Everything grew so much better in the hoop house, even in the summer. I had no idea. It turns out that especially tomatoes are much less susceptible to disease. I was able to grow eggplants in a way that had never been possible before. And more importantly, we started to extend the season so that I actually have members coming out during all 12 months of the year. And these are not heated. I want to be clear. These are solar hoop houses. We don't use any gas heaters or anything. So this is probably about mid-March. And you can see outside it's still frozen, but inside we've got a lot of greens that have survived the winter. And over the years, we've kind of specialized and figured out which varieties of lettuce will survive, even down to 15 or 20 below. And there are a lot of greens that with a little bit of protection will survive. Almost all the spinaches will. There's some red spinaches that are outstanding that you could never find one of these in the grocery store, right? But we can grow them in our gardens. And you can, of course, you can do this this kind of hoop house. There is nothing to this except a single layer of plastic, right? There's nothing special about this. Like you could have any kind of structure that will keep snow from crushing everything, and you could be doing this in your backyard.
So how long will that last, though, the house?
The hoop house? Well, the structure should last as long as I do. The plastic needs to be replaced about every 5 or 6 years. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So, and this one is on wheels. And if you came out 2 years ago, then I'm sure I talked to you about it, but sometime in the next week, we will, so let me back up a step. So right now, we have tomatoes up to the rafters of the hoop houses. I should have had a couple pictures of that. Anyway, and this week we're thinking we're going to have to cut all the tomatoes out. These are not growing much anyway. And we will slide the hoop house over all of our winter crops. So it's almost like we have 2 hoop houses in one. And you'll notice I'm saying hoop house because a greenhouse is heated. and a hoop house is not heated. That's kind of the main distinction.
So how do you irrigate with water? Are you guys
All drip irrigation.
drip irrigation?
Yeah. So the one thing about having a hoop house is it's basically like creating a desert in your yard. And if you know, where do all of our vegetables from the grocery store come from?
Desert.
The desert, right? California, the San Joaquin Valley, right? And those places are really becoming deserts.
Yes.
And that's another reason to start growing more vegetables in this area, because we have the rain and we have the soil. And the amount of money you can make per acre with a crop like this, and we don't have the infrastructure for it, but it could be a huge economic boom for this state. It really could. But I digress. Here's some harvesters. This is in March. He's harvesting some beets. That's one of our hardy crops. This is my friend Danny Ham here. He he probably eats 5 pounds of kale a week.
Wow.
My first 2 years of the CSA, I had 30 memberships, and which would be about 75 people. And now we're at about 75 memberships and about 220 people. But I had 5 kale plants and nobody wanted them at all. And they were just beautiful, big plants, and everybody's like, oh, what's that stuff? And now, kale takes a lot of space because everybody is eating it. It's incredible. I'm just driving through the country and I see kale patches next to the tomatoes. It's just amazing. This crop has just changed so much in the 13 years that we've been doing Barefoot Gardens. Another thing that we do in the hoop houses is this is where we keep most of our seedlings. We start seeding in February, and we are seeding every week, probably to the end of September, probably. And we use a soil blocker, and I'll show you one of those in a bit, and all these handmade wooden trays. And each of these trays holds 60 blocks. And so this allows us to plant a lot more in a smaller space because we're always trying to keep our crop space down. So you saw those lettuces. The day we harvest those lettuces, we put down a layer of compost, get the soil ready, and then we transplant beets. And those beets will be ready in about a month. So it's just like that fast from one crop to the next.
You don't have, that's a concrete table, what is that table?
It's just a wooden table,
Yeah, so it's, what's it draining onto?
the table, the floor, the ground, the soil.
It's not going through it.
Well, it is, but there's nothing valuable underneath, I guess. Now this is about this time of year last year. And this, our hoop house was in the back position, and this is how we protected a lot of our crops into November. A simple layer of row cover makes a huge difference for these hardy greens. And you can see Will has kind of mastered these hoops made from wire. He does a really nice job, much better than I do. One of the things about Barefoot Gardens is that we have most CSAs are box models. So people will go, let me back up a step. So farmers will have maybe 30 acres of vegetables, and then once a week or twice a week, they get a crew, they harvest all the vegetables, they put them into boxes, they put the boxes into trucks, they send the trucks, one truck to that town, one truck to this town. And we kind of started out that way. But what I found is that people have such different interests in terms of the kinds of vegetables that they want, right? How many of you like beets? Okay, well that shows the generation I'm talking to. Because if I was talking to people in their 20s, 3 of you would have raised your hands, right? So I have to grow a lot of beets for baby boomers, right? Because they grew up with real gardens, real farm gardens, big home gardens, right? And they ate beets. They had canned, right. But a lot of people, they're like, well, maybe I'll try it once this season, but I just don't like beets. And so one of the problems with the box model is that when it's beet day, I got beets and I don't like beets, and my friend got 3 beets and she really wanted 12. So we've been evolving towards a pick your own model where people pick what they want and where we are watching what they are harvesting and we're planting to catch up and to try to keep ahead of them. So I'll have years where there's an arugula craze, and everybody wants arugula all the time. So we're planting arugula every 3 weeks, right? But then summer comes, the arugula gets a little bitter, nobody's taking arugula, and we have to focus on cilantro, which is so hard to keep going during the summer, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, everybody, you plant your cilantro, 3 days later it's this tall, right? 2 weeks later it's woody. Well, we plant cilantro every 10 days, all summer long, because it's an important crop for us. So, in the end, we've become an almost entirely pick-your-own model. And so Kelly is here harvesting flowers in one of the patches, and we've had to do a lot of training because people that don't know any better, you know, like there's a couple from Manhattan that moved to Western because the wife was an anthropologist, and the first day they just went walking right down the middle of a new bed of seedlings this tall. That kind of thing happens more than I'd like to think, but that's my fault, right? Because I haven't marked the beds carefully enough. It needs to be clear where they are. So we do things like we put string barriers around so people know not to walk. Every once in a while we'll put our hands on somebody's shoulder and say, actually, those are baby plants you're walking on. Right? And we do a lot of education with kids because we really want kids in the garden. But we really don't want kids in the garden, right? So actually, Will and I, when it's harvest time, we actually spend a lot of time kind of helping kids understand where they can be, where they can't be. And kids pick it up faster than the adults if it's handled right. So this is a typical harvest night. You can see people are out chatting, talking. Barefoot Gardens has become a really important place for people to meet each other. A lot of people's best friends in Macomb, at least in our circle, met at the garden. And they educate each other about what crops to use and how to use new crops.
Specific day? Or
Yeah, so right now we're at 3 harvest times. We have a harvest during most of the year, during the summer, from 6 to 8 in the evening on Mondays, 8 to 10 in the mornings on Thursdays, and then 9 to 11 on Saturdays. Now we have fall hours when it gets cold. Now it's 4 to 6 in the evenings on Mondays, and then on Thursdays it's 9 to 11, and Saturdays it's 1 to 3 in the afternoon. So they can catch a little bit of sun. It's not quite the harvest party it is in the summer when it's this cold. So there's one of our harvesters, and you see she's just harvesting. Isn't that a great tattoo?
Yes.
She's harvesting a deer tongue lettuce, a head of deer tongue lettuce.
Is that a deer tongue tattoo? Looks like
Could be.
That's not cheap.
And we have a couple big gatherings. One of the things that we have done every year, except this year we actually got rained out. We had serious weather. Is our summer solstice party, and we have a big bonfire. And for a number of years, we had a local artist who would build these sculptures, and he'd spend a month on them, and then on summer solstice, we'd burn them. You see this kid? It's just like,
Very large Easter bunny.
and there's another summer solstice. That was at Barefoot Gardens 1, our first place. We actually moved locations 8 years ago. Over the last few years, we've started doing garden classes. Will is actually one of my students from my very first garden class, and now he co-teaches the classes with me. And like I was telling Bob earlier, eventually I'm going to be working for Will. He's learning faster than I am, and he's going to run things pretty soon here. But in April, we have at least one workshop and sometimes two days of workshop where people come and we try to get them, usually people who've gardened a little bit before, but depending on the year and depending on the interest, we have different levels of garden classes. And this is from this spring.
John, we were at your place at the bus trip. We were on that porch.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you would have seen that porch for sure. In fact, I've got another shot of that porch. So this is from the first garden class, and here's this skinny young kid right here. That's Will. From 4 years ago. And here we're building trays and doing seed blocks. And here they're transplanting leeks.
Transplanting what?
Leeks.
That's what you said.
Yep. And that's the classroom. Remember that porch?
Yeah, we do.
And that was our graduating garden class in the spring.
So you enlist the garden class to help you plant? Is that-
Well, you know, they've got to learn it somehow. It's not just selfish motives. And honestly, it doesn't save us much time. We have to go back and redo things a lot.
How many acres do you have?
So my place is 8 acres, but probably 4 of it is floodable. And this year, like 8 acres was floodable. But we actually garden on 4 acres when it's expanded to the greatest extent.
Do you charge for a tuition for your garden class?
Uh-huh. Yeah, we do. Everything is on a sliding scale. We offer up to 75% discounts for garden shares during the season, and we do the same thing for the garden classes. So, there you go.
What does CSA stand for?
Thank you for that question. Community Supported Agriculture.
Okay.
And CSA started in Japan because it was a group of Japanese women who couldn't find the vegetables that they had grown up with. So they hired a farmer to grow their vegetables for them. And this group of women shared the cost of paying this farmer. And in the 1980s in Massachusetts, there was a farm called Indian Line Farm that had the first CSA. And now there are literally thousands of CSAs throughout the country. And it's an interesting model for a lot of small startup businesses also. There are CSA meat producers, there are CSA flower growers, there are CSA restaurants where people pay the money up front because one of the problems of starting a small business is having the capital.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the problems...
Stability also, right?
Right. And one of the problems for a farmer is having all the money up front to pay for seeds and fertilizer and tools and so on. And what they do, the CSA model, they pay you at the beginning of the season and they're basically buying a share of each week's produce for whatever they sign up for. And that works well for a number of different businesses. It's something that we need to think about in our small rural communities that are not what they were 50 years ago.
So John, where do you get your seeds? Or do you have a specific supplier that you like or use several? Or?
Oh yeah, so I used to Johnny Selected Seeds is the best seed company,
Really?
period, but they're expensive. Okay, but I can call Johnny's on the busiest day of the spring and those seeds will be in the mail that day. They're just, the service is just, if a tool breaks on me, I call them, they send me a new tool, no questions asked.
Oh, you buy tools from them?
I do, yeah. They carry a lot of the best tools. So Johnny's is where we go for a lot of things, especially during the season. At the beginning of the season, we get a lot of things from Fedco, F-E-D-C-O seeds, and also we like pine tree seeds. What am I forgetting? Yeah, we used to order a lot out of Baker Creek, out of Missouri, but the seed quality has been terrible. We just never know what we're going to get from them. So we just for certain crops that are safe and for like interesting south, like we grow like 8 different varieties of okra, and some of them are like this long and they're still good, right? If you grow okra, you know you're not supposed to eat them past this size, but there's some Asian okras that are just incredible. And we got those from Baker Creek. But I save my own seeds because I don't trust what they might send me. Yeah, so those would be the seeds. For the tools, Peaceful Valley is a good place. Johnny's is a good place. And I'd like to transition for a minute to Will, because I'm going to have him talk about the tools, because he's actually
Oh, yes, show us some tools.
working with them more often than I am right
And
now.
now you transition to the photography.
Yeah, so as John said, we
That's
practice
a lovely tool.
clean cultivation, which means that we come along every 7 to 10 days and disturb every inch of soil surface so that the weeds never even get started. And ideally, we're doing that before we even see anything sprouting. This is our main workhorse hoe. And we put an extra long handle on it because it doesn't come with a long handle. But anyway, it's called a 6-inch trapezoid hoe. And it gets that name from the shape. And all of the hoes that we work with are razor sharp. So we're going around in the garden, working down the bed, and every 15 minutes we pull a file out of our pocket and sharpen this up. Because a dull hoe is a hoe that makes you work too hard. So we're constantly keeping it sharp. And I like this hoe because it's really strong. It can get out big clumps of grass if I needed to, but also it can be delicate if I needed to get around those lettuce without swamping them with soil.
Hey, and I want you to pay attention to how he is holding the hoe.
That's another thing, yeah, we don't chop. We don't chop weeds, because that's a good way to hurt your back. We sweep. So I'm standing up, my thumbs are pointing up, like this, on the hoe handle, which means that you need a long hoe handle if you're tall. And I'm standing up with a straight back, cultivating like this. If I need to bend over, I do it properly with my back straight. But yeah, always standing up straight. And we're always alternating. So I might go down one way with my right hand lower, and then go back the other way with my left hand lower. So that I'm not just working one side of my body.
So where do you get the parts for that hoe?
Johnny's Selected Seeds.
Okay.
And this hoe is kind of pioneered by Elliot Coleman, who's also one
And
of
you said it
the...
comes without hand.
It comes with a handle,
But you,
but it's a shorter handle. And because we're tall, we like these tall, strong handles. Yeah.
And Elliot Coleman is very short, so we think that's why it's here's a question here while you go.
No, just a quick, this is more. But I have a hole similar to that.
Yeah.
What type of file do you use?
Just a standard mill bastard 6-inch file. Yep. And we don't even put handles on them because we go through them so fast.
But we have found that you cannot buy a decent hoe from a store. We have
Around
never
here.
found a single. I've tried to get my hardware store to carry just one decent hoe.
Yep. Every hoe you get, it has a way
They're
too
way too
thick of a
thin.
blade, and you can't sharpen it.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, these blades are very thin. They're very lightweight, which is a big deal if you're working.
You can feel it. I mean, we go out and cultivate all day long. You can feel when it's dull because you're having to work too hard. The sharper it is, the easier it is.
Replaceable blade?
And a replaceable blade on this one, yeah.
Although it would be 15 years before we would have to.
Right.
You got
So,
Where did you get the long handle?
this long handle actually comes from Johnny's Selected Seeds. This handle comes on their landscape rake or their bed preparation rake. And so we just bought a bunch of those long handles and shaved them down a little bit so they fit in the neck of this.
Turns out that it actually costs a lot more to ship what's the height on that? Like a 6-foot handle is a lot more expensive than a 5-foot. That like crosses some threshold that makes it a lot more expensive. So we think that's the other reason.
So if I only had that one hoe, it would be this one. I could do pretty much anything I needed. One stand-up hoe.
Oh, okay.
Now, for working really precise things or working really tall stuff, I use this hand hoe. It's a Japanese hand hoe, sold through Johnny's. It's $13. And this one, actually, it's high carbon steel, so we don't even need to sharpen it. It stays pretty sharp the whole time. So what are the crops that I use this for? I use this for crops that are big enough that they're kind of leafing out, but they're still exposed soil and the weeds are coming up, so I need to get under them without kind of ripping them open like this would. Or just really small, delicate crops that I have to get close to see. And so when I'm using this Japanese hand hoe, a lot of the time I'm bending down like this and trying to keep my back straight and working like that, or crouching like this, or on a kneel, right? But this is a very valuable tool. And if I had a small garden, this is probably the only hoe that I would use.
I really recommend all of you to have somebody in their 20s who works with you. It's great.
Makes you sleep better at night.
I feel so rested.
So as John said, about 75% of our crops are transplants, which means that we put the seed into these blocks and then put them out. We're not putting seeds directly into the ground for most of our crops. So this is our soil blocker, sold through Johnny's Selected Seeds. And as you see, it makes 20 soil blocks each time. We make our own seed block mix, so it's 3 parts peat, 2 parts compost, 2 parts sand with a few other minerals. And then we build these trays out of wood so that we can lock 3 of these in there, which means that you get 60 of them in each tray. And we have 2 other versions of this. This is an 1.5-inch block. We have a 2-inch block and a 3-inch block, depending on which vegetable we're seeding, how big the block needs to be. So cucurbits, all of our winter squash, go directly into 3-inch blocks because they grow so quickly. Whereas onions, green onions, go into these small ones because they can stand the smaller blocks. So yeah, so this is what they look like. And this is a green onion, a scallion that I planted. You put about 10 into a block. This is probably 3 weeks old, maybe, and I'm going to plant these on Saturday.
And
so we'll stick them in the ground, water them, and as they get bigger, we'll cover them up. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
we plant onions in clumps of 3 and 4. And an onion, and we start all of our onions from seed. As far as I know, we are the only growers, at least in our region, that most people buy plants. And that's not a bad way to do it. But we find that we can plant them from seed, and then we have a lot bigger choice about what kind of onions we grow. And we actually really grow a lot of interesting onions. But if you plant them 3 or 4 or 5 in a block, they'll actually push each other out, and you'll have a little nest of onions, and it doesn't seem to affect their growth much, and it saves us so much work because we're cultivating around 4 onions instead of 1.
So
Right.
then afterwards, you don't separate them at all?
Well, not until we harvest them.
Not to the harvest?
And sometimes we'll come through and just harvest the biggest ones and let the other ones grow another couple days.
It's good to know that they will move.
So you have a special spot that you put this mixture in and then you go make the plugs?
Yeah, why don't you talk about how you...
Yeah, so for instance, this winter I made 10 batches of this seed block mix and just piled it up into the garage. And then I pulled from that throughout the year and filled up these trays. And I think it lasted us until about July. I started making new mix.
And again, we're planting every week.
I'm still...
Somehow you compacted that.
Right, yeah. So you mix up the soil block mix and
you
get it
soak it.
wet.
Yeah.
Get it the right consistency. It can't be too wet. And then you kind of mash it into here. This is the motion, like that. And pick it up, put it on the tray, and squeeze this top handle, and it pushes them out.
Yeah. And he can do a full tray in about 15 seconds.
Yeah, it's really a pretty quick operation.
Yeah.
And these are totally worth it. They're very well made. I think they're about $100 a piece, but if you take care of it, it'll last longer than I will. So 75% of our crops are transplants, and for the other 25, we use precision seeding tools. So this is what Johnny's calls the 4-point seeder, and it can take all types of seeds. It can take the smallest ones if you're doing lettuce or radishes, or it can do bigger beets and spinach. And you just adjust, has all these little holes, and you can adjust how big your seed is. And then,
Ouch.
Man, you missed the light.
and then it has these brushes on top that you can tighten or loosen to allow more or less seeds to go through.
So where do you put the seeds? You just dump them in there?
There's these 4 hoppers,
Oh, okay.
and sometimes we just put them in 1, sometimes we put them in 2, and then often with radishes we'll put them in all 4. And this makes it so that we're pretty confident when we go through and seed a bed that it's going to come up in the spacing that we want. The thing about using this though is you have to really prepare that soil bed.
Yeah, if you use it, that soil bed needs to be even. We spend a lot, Will spends a lot of time making them perfectly shaped and
mix in the compost
you have to
make it so
compact
it's perfectly
the
flat.
soil surface just a little bit, or the wheels don't turn right. It's a little trickier than we're making it sound.
And we have a few different precision seeding tools. Like this one we use Often for carrots, we'll use this one. And then for bigger seeds like beans or edamame or corn, we have a walk behind earthway seeder that does the bigger seeds.
And those are great seeders. I used an earthway for 8 years before we ever got this precision seeder.
And you figured this out by kind of trial and error?
Well, there were a couple. The guy that we keep mentioning, Elliot Coleman, came out with a book in the mid-90s, and that was kind of my main source of information for a long time. And now Elliot Coleman has other people who are doing new things. And actually, this kind of farming is not uncommon in certain parts of the country, especially the Northeast.
Yeah.
In a county the size of Tazewell or Peoria, you might have 15 or 20 people doing what we're doing. It's just that nobody's doing it around here.
Because of corn and soybean.
Well, just because nobody is doing it, I guess. I think it helps to be next to an urban center,
Yeah.
and we don't have that near Macomb. So maybe there's not as much.
And you're dealing with primarily the university population. They already, know about all this stuff, and they're
And
committed to the.
a lot of my faculty members that come to my garden are from other countries.
Oh, yes.
Yes, many of them. A lot of them from India, Pakistan, Taiwan,
Even Africa now,
Oh,
there's a lot of them.
Spain. Yeah, I've got them. So, eating fresh vegetables, like
Yes.
really fresh vegetables, is not something that Americans have been doing for a couple generations.
That's
But
right.
a lot of these people have
Yeah,
come where they had a
garden.
garden in their yard, right? I'm an English as a second language teacher at the university. That's one of my day jobs, and my students from the island all had gardens and all could cook from scratch beautifully. 18-year-olds, right? They walked out in my garden and knew exactly what they wanted and would go in and cook a meal. Can you imagine taking a random group of 10 Americans at 18?
Where's the hot dogs?
There's no chance. And there's a reason that we look like we do, right? Because we're eating bad
All
food.
kinds of crap.
Right.
That's what we're doing.
Thank you. Well, you can say. Yeah.
Yeah, so as John said, we're sort of, as much as we are gardeners, we're market gardeners. And Elliot Coleman wrote the book on market gardening, and we've sort of followed in his footsteps in many ways.
But improved on something.
Yes.
We think.
One of the best tools that we have is this row cover, and you saw it in pictures. It's just a really thin, spun down cloth, and it comes in long rolls of 100 or 500 or 1,000 feet. What? Oh, sorry. And we use this all the time. We use it in cold weather to keep crops warmer, and we use it in hot weather to keep bugs off of crops. So cucurbits, for instance, all of our winter squash, cucumbers, we don't put anything out without row cover, because as soon as those bugs hit it, the squash bugs and the cucumber beetles, it's weak. So winter squash will be under row cover for the first couple weeks of its life, and then as soon as it flowers, we take it off and we say, you're on your own. And by that time, the plants are usually big enough to hold their own against the bugs.
And that's after starting them in blocks for a couple weeks. It's probably 3 weeks or 4 weeks, but we wait until they're just kind of busting out, and sometimes we even let them just crawl out under the row cover, right? But some years cucumber beetles, as you know, are terrible problems.
So you must be spending a lot of time trying to line up everything to figure out, because you said, the next day we do this. So a lot of the time spending in planning that so that you have it ready to go when it goes in, right?
Do we spend a lot of time planning?
You smile when
Some days.
Will is the planner.
I see.
My happiest moment in the garden is when John and I are walking around and just kind of like figuring out what to do
What
from a
to do
bird's eye
next.
view. Yeah, that's when I feel calm.
So what do you do
We-
about
you-
the larger population of animals that bigger ones that are
So we do have deer issues, and
How about those ones which go inside, the voles, the moles?
well, the deer issues we solve with electric fence, and that works pretty well for us when we can keep it clear.
Yeah.
Voles and moles don't seem to be that big of an issue for us.
Except in the winter in the hoop houses.
Right, yeah.
And for them, that's like summer vacation.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not eating our crops, they're just making these tunnels.
just making
And so
the mess.
sometimes the tunnels are an issue, like when we're trying to start a bed of carrots, we can't keep it wet because the water just goes
Yeah,
right
that's
down
what
these
it
tunnels.
And in a dry year, it's a bigger problem than in a wet year,
Oh.
right? Moles are terrible in a dry year because we're trying to get these seedlings established, and we're watering this bed, and the water brings the moles, right? And when you're trying to start carrots in August, and it's 100 degrees, and you're having to give every drop of water to that bed of carrots, because you know how, well, some of you know how hard carrots are to get started,
Yes,
especially when it's
yes.
hot. And then the moles come through and just tunnel through everything. We have to replant. It's a little
How about the
frustrating.
fertilizing that y'all do? What do you,
So in the past 2 years, we've started to buy compost. And we buy compost from a company called Better Earth. It's a pure-
Yeah.
You know,
And we
Better
get-
Earth.
Good
We
stuff.
just got a big truckload of, I think it was 50 cubic yards of compost,
That's a full semi-trailer.
full semi.
that
Before
didn't
that,
cost much, did it?
About $1,250.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's worth it.
before
Yeah,
that, we
it
were making our own compost and using things like green sand and rock phosphate and blood meal, soybean meal to supplement the soil. But we just can't make enough compost. We grow so many vegetables on such a large scale, and we need more.
When do you
And-
put it in? When you're, before you starting?
We generally put it in as we prep the bed. So, yeah, we'll pull up that lettuce, we'll put down an inch or two of compost, mix it into the first 2 inches, and plant right into it. Now, for things like garlic, we're starting to mulch with compost, whereas we were mulching with straw. We're starting to mulch with compost, so I mix it into our garlic beds, and I'm planting garlic right now, and then I'm gonna come along after the ground freezes and put another 2 inches on top to keep the weeds down and help cultivation in the spring. Yeah.
Do you have raised beds at all?
We do, sometimes. No permanent raised beds. We find that any boards or cinder blocks or anything like that just harbors weeds and becomes a nuisance. I like raised beds because it tells people where to walk. And that's an
Big
issue
one
for
for
us
you.
because we have to guide people. And so raised beds tells people this is where vegetables are, walk in the lower.
And raised beds helped us a lot this year.
Right, because
Right.
it's all the water in it.
Yeah.
And that was really nice. But in general, raised beds are sometimes an issue, especially in the summertime, because it just dries everything out. So it's not always the best way to go.
And you put the drip,
Tell me how you make that wonderful looking hoop.
Yeah, well, it's just number 9 gauge wire,
Okay?
and it's, how long is it? Maybe 5 feet, 5 or 6 feet. And I go along the bed, and I put one every 4 feet on one side of the bed. And I walk along on the other side of the bed and reach them over and put them.
Oh, so there's a sand bit right there, huh?
Yep. Yeah, so then you pull them out, and they're just straight, and you can store them straight.
Pull it straight right back up?
Yep,
Number 9 wire, huh?
number 9, yep.
And Will's really the master of that. I don't even try to do it because he does it so much better than I.
Will, did you say they're 4 feet long?
Hey, Will, how much do you pay you?
I think they're 5 or 6 feet, but it really depends on your bed. I think they're cut for a 30-inch bed, so.
So they're 60 inches long, 5 feet.
Yep, sounds about right.
Where do you get your roll coverage?
Row cover from Johnny's.
Johnny's.
But that's not the cheapest source. Peaceful Valley would be a good source for a lot of these things, and Peaceful Valley is cheaper for a lot of these tools.
How long have you been working for him?
Well, when was it? It was 2012 I started volunteering at Barefoot Gardens because 2 summers before I worked for John, I worked for campus garden at Monmouth College. I managed the Monmouth College Educational Garden.
You're looking at a Lincoln laureate. This was the top student 2 years ago at Monmouth College.
In 2012, I started for John in the summer, and then I've been working full-time for him since the summer of 2013. No, 2014. Yeah. Mhm.
How often, what's the life of the roll covers? Go through a full season or a couple seasons?
Yeah, it definitely goes through a full season. I'd say after 2 seasons, it starts to have some holes in it, and we don't want to mess
I
with it.
think usually before 2 seasons.
Yeah.
If we use it over the winter, it's shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it recyclable? Can you recycle?
Probably,
You just throw it away.
but I don't have recycling available anywhere where I live. Yeah, it's ridiculous, honestly.
So how about cucumber, or not cucumbers, cantaloupe? Do you grow cantaloupe?
We do, but it's a really tough crop for us.
And I'm wondering how you crop them off because, especially this year,
Yeah.
with the moisture.
We didn't get, I don't think we got any cantaloupe this year.
Yeah, we got a few,
Got a
but they
few.
were.
Very mushy.
Well, we had a handful of good ones, but it's just not worth our time. But we try every year anyway.
There's a lot better luck with watermelon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
small watermelons like this, we can grow enough of and consistently enough to grow for everybody in the CSA, and that's been a big. So we've become watermelon growers, especially the yellow ones. Little yellow watermelons like it's yellow, it's fantastic, so easy to grow.
So I saw that your hoop house, that you can open the bottom of your hoop house?
Yep, has roll-up sides on both sides.
There's a roll up side on both sides. And it's on a set of rollers and you can,
That's right. Yeah, it sits on a track.
so you got a
So-
concrete track laid out there?
No.
It's just a steel pipe along the ground,
Okay.
and that just sits on top of the ground.
Yeah, a set of pipe rollers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Will, go ahead.
Tell me about the flowers that you grow.
Yeah, the
at
flowers
your
are
playground.
flowers are really John's project. I'm not as into flowers, but flowers are also one of the earliest things that we start in seed blocks, and we start them in these tiny little mini blocks, much smaller than these, and then just kind of pop them on onto bigger ones. We have perennial flowers and annual flowers.
One thing I should have had a slide of is we actually start a lot of our seedlings in my basement in a light stand.
What a light stand.
Yeah, and that light stand will hold, we have 2 light stands now, and each of them will hold 16 trays. And the bottom row has heating pads, and that's how we start all of our peppers, tomatoes, eggplants, and a lot of the flowers. And we start them in these trays that are about this size, and will hold 120 mini blocks. And so I might have 6 of those going, and so we're starting about 800 plants at the same time, just in a little area like this on that bottom row. And that's something I would include next time for sure, because you know, a lot of growers will heat a plastic hoop house that has no insulation at all, and then use, and because they need the light, right? But it makes a lot more sense to have an insulated space and bring the light to the plants. And actually, most plants grow real well under grow lights, real simple tube lights.
And you can adjust the height of the
Yep.
light to.
But also, we can give them just the right amount of moisture.
Okay.
We can just treat them with kid gloves at that early fragile stage. Somebody asked about the flowers. We probably grow about 12 varieties of sunflowers, but we're always picking stems that are very strong. And you know, when you cut a sunflower and the next day like the head falls like this,
Yeah.
we really grow the varieties that don't do that. Because that makes me crazy. But but especially the multiple branching ones that have good strong necks. We grow several rudbeckias.
Yes.
This one's called Prairie Sun.
Yes.
We grow a lot of Titsonia,
Sonia.
and with compost, we grow those in tomato cages, and they will get up to 10 and 12 feet tall, and we use those for hedges and things. It's kind of one of our landscape features. I just love these because they bring in so many hummingbirds and bees, and that's another rudbeckia there. I don't know if I have. Oh, and then a lot of zinnias, of course, and then here's a salvia. And I don't know, I'm trying to think of some others. Mostly flowers that are blooming mid-June through September. We kind of focus on those.
So they're not part of your CSA?
Oh, yes.
Or they are?
They are, yeah. So I have people that really come for the flowers more than the vegetables.
What time of year then? May, April,
For-
May, to come get those flowers?
Okay, so the flowers really start to produce in June, about mid-June, and it's just part of the membership right now. I think we should wrap it up. Anybody else have another?
I got it.
We got.
Just one really quick, are you familiar at all like with certain types of cover or spring manure crops, and particularly I'm wondering, is crimson clover overwinter here?
Crimson clover will not overwinter most winters. Now, do you want it to overwinter? We've really moved away from cover crops. I used to do a lot more with cover crops, but it's just, we just garden so intensively right up to the end of the season that we haven't done much. I think crimson clover might be all right. I think you could start it, I think if it's young, it will overwinter, so you could start it in like, maybe as late as now.
Yeah, we've got some up already.
Okay.
It's in a field, and we're
Yeah.
looking for.
I've seen it overwinter a few times.
You were talking about the watering, you have drip irrigation all along?
In the hoop houses.
Oh, in the hoop
We
houses.
don't, mostly
about here?
overhead, mostly overhead irrigation.
Overhead.
A lot of hand watering.
Yes.
The last 2 seasons we haven't really needed to water, so we haven't been thinking about it much.
You must have had it, did you have as much rain as we did, did you?
Well,
I think they had more.
Yeah, you had more.
yeah.
Communicate with my brother in Macomb, he's always getting more rain than
Yeah, we had bean plants just rotting in place. I don't, same as you have.
Do you have any handouts?
I,
We didn't ask you to bring handouts, that's all.
No, but
Way to go, Bob.
Bob decided that if I can get them here, that's good.
Wait for Bob.
Yeah.
We'll work on it.
I've got a few cards with some information on them if you're interested.
He's got a website.
Now, we've got a great website and a great Facebook page. So if you're interested, barefootgardens.org is our website. Can we bring that up right now?
Julia, go ahead, please.
She's
I can't, I don't know the password, they won't give me the
Oh.
password. I mean, it's illegal.
Because the website might be something that we probably could have had. Yeah.
What's the cost of being a member?
So the membership, it depends a lot. So some people will sign up for a month, some people will sign up for the entire year, some people will sign up for the summer, and some people will sign up for the summer and then add October, right? So a family membership for the entire year is $800, and for a single person it's $400. I have people, we sometimes charge as little as 25% of that if it's somebody who is really in need. But yeah, so that's the cost. Otherwise, during the summer, it's $150 a month for a family or a couple, $75 a month for a single.
So how does that work? Do they come in and pick what they want then?
Pretty much we have, so they walk into the porch and there's a big whiteboard and there'll be some guidelines. So when the first tomatoes are ripening, we're like, 1 ripe tomato, right? But 3 weeks later, we're like, please fill all of your buckets with tomatoes. And actually, tomatoes are something that we've really been tweaking planting so that we don't have these gluts of tomatoes and then it come mid-September, there are no tomatoes left, right? Because they kind of spend themselves. So we actually do about, this year we did 3 successions of tomatoes so that we would have them continuing. In fact, we have some that are just ripening in the hoop house. They were probably could have been planted a week earlier. And it's the timing for fall crops is so tricky. It is so difficult because so much depends on the weather. And 3 days in August are equal to like 2 weeks in October, right? Or 3 weeks. And boy, getting that timing right on like getting broccoli to head before it gets too cold, but while it's still cool enough that it doesn't get
Heavy.
yeah, they're hot.
There you go.
The magic Kathy, 2 machines we can get things working.
Yeah, so that's a slideshow from the website.
Yeah, it's on the website.
You saw that photo.
So my question was, there is a great deal of planning that goes on to this event, really is. You kind of played that down to the And you just stepped into it when you said, I got to figure out how to get the broccoli to head at the right time.
Yeah.
So realistically, you got 4 acres of plots. You got to figure out what we're going to plant here, there, and afterwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the whole season. So there is a significant amount of planning that does that. And
But you know, the thing is that I started with a bed the size of this, and it's been growing every year, and it's mostly in my mind, right? It's just like, oh, I really need to be planting cilantro today, which has been killing Will because he's an organizer.
See,
Right.
see, Lee and I couldn't do it without a Gantt chart. There's no possible way.
Yeah, but I walk outside and I'm like, feels like I should be planting something now.
Which is really
You get a
why-
lot, you get a lot of direction from your clients, I mean, we would like to have some more of this. or-
Well,
Yes.
now they come out to my place and I'm talking to them every week. I mean, I know each of them by name. I'm visiting with them every week, and you bet I'm watching what they're picking, right? And I see somebody that is, like, I've got a member this year who is from the Punjab region of India, and she asked me to grow the Punjab gourd. I don't know if she had a different name for it. And so I got online and I searched for it, and we got the seed, and we grow what it's called in the United States, it's called birdhouse gourd. But they eat it like a zucchini. And we found out that it's delicious. Who knew? Right? And you just slice it, but they eat them like this big.
Really?
Yeah, so we were eating Punjab gourds instead of zucchini because our zucchini didn't do very well, but these gourds are growing like crazy. Nope, just ate them
Not
up.
if they're young like that.
So, obviously you have to register with the state of Illinois and pay sales tax. You've got.
I pay income tax.
Pay income tax, you don't pay sales tax for selling those.
Well, it does.
Yeah, it's a membership. So they're not buying the vegetables, they're paying a
Ah,
membership.
memberships.
Remember, he has a unique business model. He said they pick what they want.
Uh-huh.
He tells them what's available. He tells them how much they can pick of that particular item.
Or I asked them not to pick more than a certain amount, but I have never sold, well, that's not true. I did farmer's market for a couple of years, but I don't sell anything, but that's not even true. Occasionally I sell something, like there was a special event on campus and I grew a lot of their food, but I don't want to be thinking about, oh, that tomato is 37 cents. I mean, well, that would ruin it for me if I had to do that. I just want to grow the garden, and I just want them to come out and enjoy it and be out on the landscape and harvest what they want, and I'm going to learn from them what they want, and I'm going to try to grow it better the next year if I can.
How many people have looked at your model and are trying to replicate?
I don't think it'll work at beekeeping.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there are too many. Well, beekeeping's such a tough business right now. Oh my gosh. And you've got the African bees coming too.
So
Well, you mentioned there are other CSAs around. I did Google CSAs. I found two other than yourself.
Oh,
you
yeah.
did.
Yeah, but they're
And that advertised in this area.
but it's the box model.
Yeah.
Right.
Ann Patterson does one, Living Earth Farm.
Yeah.
Oh, is she still doing it?
Yeah, but she couldn't get it now. The last time I talked to her, they came, she was delivering it now.
Well, and plus she like works with different farms and has different growers, right? It's kind of a different.
Well, John and Will, we thank you for coming over.